All right, well, good morning, Southeast Online family. Fun to look back and see what was an amazing Easter experience where we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and that super image of baptism with hundreds of people around Southeast family getting baptized. So fun to look back. I'm Steven, this is Stacy, and you're our online fam. We're glad that you are joining us. Stacy, looking back at last weekend, what sticks out? What are you thinking about this week?
You know, it was just fun to be able to experience what was happening backstage. I think that they just made it such a special experience for anybody getting baptized and being able to feel that energy in the room. It was just really an awesome thing just to be able to be part of.
Oh, it was fun to, they gave you a lot of sneak peeks in there and seeing that as well. But, the thing I loved is if you walked out of that room wet, when we saw a wet person, we knew what that meant, right?
Yeah.
We knew what that meant, and you're going to get cheered for and all those things. And I think it's tempting sometimes as an online family in these moments to think somehow we're excluded from this decision, but that is not the case, online fam.
That is not the case. And if this is something that you are wanting to look at doing, is getting baptized, then go ahead and text CONNECT to 733-733, and somebody from our team will reach out to you this week, and we'll see about making that happen. And then if you just need prayer or you just want to get connected in any kind of way, go ahead and send that text today.
Yeah, absolutely. Text Connect because, that's how Kyle shared the story of Aramis from Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah.
He just reached out. He was watching on YouTube, said, I need to be baptized. And Kayla, my girlfriend, she's ready to be baptized. Yep. And that's how that got started. So we care about you and we can do this. So let's make it happen. Reach out to us as well. Starting a brand new sermon series this weekend. It's called Blind Spots, okay? And what I love about this, it's all about how emotions sometimes can get the best of us. They can sneak up on us and make us go blind. Not that you or I ever have this problem where emotion gets the best of us.
This is the story of my life, y'all.
Yeah, I know.
I can let my emotions just completely take over and blind me to what's actually happening.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true of all of us. So it's going to be a great series for that. So we're dialing into what it means to do that with that. Want to stay tuned to the very end because at the end of service, guys, we have three things I want to remind you that are going to be happening at the end of service today. Number one, we're going to be checking in with Arkansas. Derek's there, got special things happening there. Secondly, we're going to be hearing from Alice all the way from England. She traveled to Louisville to worship with us the last few weeks, so we're going to be hanging out with Alice to hear her experience. And then at the very end, we have a story. When I went to Tallahassee a couple of weeks ago, I caught up with Mark in Tallahassee. Tremendous story of what God's doing through him in Tallahassee and how his online fam is a part of that. Stacey, it's good stuff happening at the end of service.
It is. So let's go ahead, head on into worship, y'all, and we'll see you after service.
Absolutely.
Bones awake and treasures of faith are never enough. You came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Come on, church, let's sing it out. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. He's a good God, amen. And I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. Because the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than
Well, we are moving into a time of our service that we do every week called communion. And what this looks like is we get to press pause as a church family and take a step back and share a meal together. And I know if you're new to church or new here at Southeast, that might sound a little strange. Like, why are we breaking up the flow of worship and speaking to eat a meal together? But what's beautiful is this is not just any ordinary meal. This is a sacred and holy meal that followers of Jesus have shared together for the last 2,000 years, where we come to these two elements, the bread and the cup. The bread that represents Jesus' body that was broken for us on the cross, and the cup that represents his blood that was poured out. And as we eat and drink, we remember and celebrate the victory of Jesus and the faithful love of our God. That in Jesus, the creator of all things, left the glory and splendor of heaven and stepped into his own creation and gave of himself in the most humbling, self-sacrificial of ways, leading to death on a cross. But 3 days later, Jesus stepped out of his own grave so that in him we too could move from death to life, from graves into gardens. That in Jesus we could move from darkness to light, from addiction to freedom, from brokenness to healing, from loneliness and isolation to belonging and family, from death to life, a life that can begin now in Jesus and one that never ends. That's what we celebrate every week as we share this meal together. Now, I know in this room, there's probably two different groups represented. That for some of us in this room, what we'd say is this, I am a follower of Jesus. At some point in my life, I made a decision to follow him. And if that's you, I want to let you know this is an open communion. So whether you call Southeast home or maybe you're visiting from another church, please participate. Maybe for others of us, though, in this room, what we'd say is this, that's a beautiful story. I just don't know if I believe it yet. If that's you, can we say this? We are so glad you're here. Like, you belong here. And keep coming back, keep wrestling with this as long as you need. But I want to challenge you in this moment to have a conversation with Jesus. I know that might sound or feel weird or awkward if you've never done that before, but y'all, he is the one who sees you and knows you and intimately loves you. If you lay your heart before him this morning, the things you've come in here with that are heavy on your shoulders and on your heart, he will meet you in that moment. We all have a way to respond during this next moment, so I want to invite us around the metaphorical dinner table. And if you are a follower of Jesus and you take the bread and take the cup, you're free to eat and drink when you're ready.
I've been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head. I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire and darkest nights. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father, and I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am made, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Sing, I say, 'cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Thank you guys so much for worshiping with us. You can have a seat.
Thursday night, the first baptism we had was from a lady whose name was Linda. She was baptized as a baby. She was 74, gave me permission to share that. And she had just been putting it off for a long time. And it was a little bit difficult because everyone around her assumed that she'd already done it. And so it meant humbling herself, and she did that. Last night, Paul came forward, and I saw this gentleman removing a prosthetic leg, so that he could come into the water and be baptized, balancing himself on one leg as he was obedient to Jesus. You think about different excuses, and he wasn't going to let anything keep him from not being obedient to what God had asked him to do. A few minutes ago was from a lady who, she said, well, I was watching Easter service online this morning, and I realized while I was watching it online, I needed to go there and I needed to be baptized. And so within a few hours, she went from watching online to celebrating her church family. Every time someone's baptized, they're telling the story of Easter. And so it's this old life has gone, new life has come. And because of the resurrection, we can believe that it's true, that Jesus died and Jesus rose again. And Jesus, our hope is in you. Easter was an awesome weekend. Each person who was baptized is telling a story of God's grace, new beginning, and he sets us free, as we talked about, from the guilt of our sin, shame of our sin, and he sets us free from the fear of death, just all kinds of reasons to celebrate. We baptized last weekend 711 people in 15 different locations. And it was really just beautiful to watch. I had someone say to me after one of the services how inspiring it is to see so many people, the way he said it was, come to Jesus. And I agreed with him, and then I thought about it a little bit later, and while I understand and agree with what he said, really what we're celebrating isn't so much people coming to Jesus as we are Jesus coming to people. Right? Like what we celebrate over Easter is that Jesus came and he pursued, and he was born as a baby, and he gave his life on the cross, and he came back to life and conquered death. It's not so much that we come to Jesus. We don't really get much credit for that at all. We take a step of obedience and we submit ourselves, but he's the one who comes to us, and that's what we celebrate as a church. This weekend we're starting a new series called Blind Spots. A blind spot is a phrase that we typically use in the context of driving. It's that part of the road that you can't see, and something might be there, but you can't see that it's there. And so unless you intentionally look, you won't know. I've taught, my wife and I together, have taught 4 teenagers to drive. Like I don't want to take all the credit or the blame for that, but when you're teaching them to drive, you're constantly telling them, check your blind spot. Although I don't think you usually say it like that. It's more like, check your blind spot. Like there's some level of panic and urgency to it because you realize, hey, they're changing lanes. They're getting ready to merge. This is a really important time to check your blind spot. Rearview mirror, side mirror, look over your shoulder. Make sure you intentionally look for what you can't see. And the passenger might be able to see it. People behind you might be able to see it. But from your position and your perspective, unless you intentionally look, you're not going to see it. And so what we would recognize is that all of us have some blind spots in life, but specifically what we're going to talk about in this series are some of the emotional blind spots we have. Emotions that have a way of sneaking up on us, and if we're not careful, they run us off the road. So we want to pay attention to those. And the Bible talks to us a lot about that. One of the ways it talks to us about these blind spots in our lives is by telling us the stories of people who didn't look over their shoulder. And so what we're gonna do in the next number of weeks is we're gonna study some Old Testament characters. Some of these will be familiar to you. A number of them I think might be a little less familiar, but one of the reasons that we have so many stories in the Old Testament of people is because those stories are meant to serve as examples to us. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6 talks about this, that those stories are there in part as a warning to us. And so the Old Testament is written primarily to point us to Jesus, right? To recognize our need for a Savior. Jesus is coming is the theme, is the thread of the Old Testament, that we need a Savior, a Redeemer, the Messiah is coming. But along the way, we are introduced to these people that we can relate with, people who oftentimes had these blind spots that they missed or they overlooked. And so we want to pay attention to their stories. We want to learn from them. These days, most cars that are manufactured have a light on the side view mirror that lets you know that there's something there. There's something in your blind spot, right? There's a sensor, I guess, built into that mirror that senses what you can't see, and it lets you know, hey, you need to look over your shoulder. When you see that light, if you're starting to change lanes, that light just reminds you, hey, this is an important time to pay attention. And I want you to think of these stories as kind of the flashing light on the side view mirror that is reminding you to pay attention to some things, sensing some things that might be coming up on you quicker than you think, sensing that there's something maybe that you notice in your side view mirror and it looks small, but if you look over your shoulder, you begin to recognize it's bigger than you thought and it's coming quick. And so we want to study some of these Old Testament examples with the spirit of humility and checking our own blind spots and then surrendering them to Jesus to redeem, to heal us, to make us new. So we're going to start in Genesis chapter 4, and we're going to talk about the blind spot of anger. The blind spot of anger. So in Genesis 4, we read a story that is probably at least somewhat familiar to you. Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel, and here's what we read about them. Verse 2. It says, now Abel kept flocks. He was a shepherd, and Cain worked the soil. He's a farmer. And in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. The Bible doesn't tell us that God had commanded that or instructed them to do so. They instinctively seem to understand that God has blessed them with this, so they're going to give something back to him. And verse 4 says, but Abel, younger brother, brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. And the Lord, it says, looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering, he didn't look with favor. So notice as we read this first that God sees the person and then the offering. It's Cain and his offering and Abel and his offering. He sees the heart, he knows the motive before he sees the offering. But what you have here are two brothers who both give to God. That's good. But Abel gives the fat portions and the firstborn. In other words, he gives the very best. He gives the first and the best of what he has to God. And so right from Genesis chapter 4, there's an example for us of what God blesses. When we give the first, we give the best. But Cain, he gives, but it seems like it's more out of the leftovers, right? Like the implication is Abel says, God, I want to honor you. Here's the first and the best of what you've blessed me with. And Cain comes along, and it seems like, at least the implication would be, God, I'm going to give you the leftovers. I'm going to harvest, and what's left, what I don't need, what I pick up that wasn't gathered, I'll give that to you. And the Bible just tells us that God blessed Abel's offering, that he rejected the offering of Cain. And here's how Cain responds, verse 5. Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So this is the first time anger is mentioned ever. First time anger comes up is right here. Cain was very angry. There are around 34,000 identified emotions that we can have, some combination of emotions. But researchers would tell you that there are primarily three emotions that we tend to identify. Primarily, there are 3 out of 34,000 that we recognize: happy, sad, and angry. Those are the 3 that we tend to feel. Or if we translate that into emojis, it would look like this, like happy, sad, angry. And one of the things that we will see in this series is that we need to be able to identify our emotions, because our emotions are contagious. I'm like, you understand that, you feel that culturally, you know that's true. It's also been shown through research. Dr. Daniel Goldman explains it this way. He says, emotions are more contagious than the flu.
And this dynamic is so powerful that in one study, 3 volunteers sat silently in a circle for 2 minutes, and at the end of the time, the most emotionally expressive person transmitted his or her mood to the other 2 without saying a word. And in every such session, the mood the most expressive person had going in was also the mood the other 2 felt coming out, whether it was happy, bored, anxious, or angry. And some of you read that and you're like, yeah, I know that's true. And you're getting the name or the face of somebody that you live with, and you just know that's what happens. Like, you don't know what kind of mood they're gonna be in, you don't know what kind of emotions they're gonna be living with, but whatever mood they're in, whatever emotions they have, it's like this thermostat that is determining the temperature for the rest of the house. It just goes how they go. They're more emotionally expressive. And so science would tell you here that if you're a joy bringer, if you're happy and you're emotionally expressive with your joy, you're gonna make people around you more joyful. If you're discouraged, then that emotion is gonna cause other people to feel discouraged. If you're angry, it's especially true. So the 2 most contagious emotions are anger and fear. Anger and fear. Now, I could give you examples of how that's true, of how anger and fear are the most contagious emotions, but we're all living in the middle of that. Like, we just recognize how true that is in our culture, that it just takes one angry person to cause a lot of other people to get angry. It just takes one person who's especially fearful to cause a lot of other people to feel afraid. And so emotions are incredibly contagious. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, why do we feel the way we feel? And that's what God does here for Cain. It says Cain was very angry. Verse 5 tells us that. And then here's how God responds, verse 6. And so the Lord said to Cain, why? Like, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, listen to this warning here. Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. Verse 8, now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. So, verse 6, God asks, why are you so angry? And for some of you, like, that's the question here this weekend. Like, why? I know you're angry, but why are you angry? Like, stop and check your blind spot. Look over your shoulder. Like, why do you feel that way? Where's that coming from? One of the things I want you to notice here is that God, when this emotion comes up, doesn't say to Cain, hey, you're feeling this way, you need to feel this way. He asks him why he's feeling that way. He wants Cain to identify it, and then he wants him to examine it, which I don't know that a lot of us were taught to do with our emotions. Like, I think a lot of us grew up in churches or homes where when it came to emotions, there were 2 kinds. The kind you should feel and the kind you shouldn't feel. And if you feel the way you shouldn't feel, then hey, start feeling the way you should. Like, that was it. If you feel this way, stop it and feel this way. Not super helpful. Like, that didn't work very well and not very biblical. Like, the question is, how do you feel? Identify it, and then ask yourself, like, why do I feel that way? And that's what God does here with Cain. He says, hey, check your blind spot. Why are you feeling this way? Sometimes anger can be appropriate. Most anger is not, but it can be. In Ephesians chapter 4, it says, in your anger, do not sin. The King James says it even stronger. Be ye angry and sin not. Like, there is an appropriate place for anger. We see this in the life of Jesus, where he goes into the temple and he turns over the temple or the tables in anger. He's angry. Or we see it in the way he talks to some of the religious leaders, and yet we know Jesus didn't sin, so he's angry, expressing anger, but we know he was perfect and he didn't sin. So what's that mean? Well, he's angry because he's protecting. It's a protective anger. It's what makes it righteous. It's an anger that's not It's not selfish, right? Like Jesus had every reason to be angry when he was unjustly treated during his trials, when he was crucified on the cross. Like he had every reason to be angry when he's being spit upon and while he's being cursed at, but he's not angry in those moments because he didn't get angry when he was personally offended or when he was personally hurt by other people. He got angry on behalf of the vulnerable. That's a righteous anger. He's angry on behalf of people who need to be protected. And so anger can be righteous when it's protective. Sometimes it can be righteous when it has a purpose. Like one of the things anger does is it can prepare your body for a fight or flight response. Like if you're in an abusive situation, if you're being hurt, like your body can respond with anger that allows you to get out of that situation. So anger can have a purpose. It can be protective. But most of the anger that we feel and struggle with, like that's not it. And so God says to Cain, why are you angry? I think there's a lot of different ways that Cain might have answered that question if he would have stopped and he would have really thought about it. It's hard to do though when you're angry. Because when you're angry, you don't feel like stopping and asking questions. You don't feel like looking over your shoulder. But Cain was angry, I think, because he compared himself to his brother's situation. He was jealous. Maybe there was a long history between the two of them. Maybe he felt entitled when he looked at Abel and what Abel was doing, how God had blessed him. And he like, well, why does Abel get that and I don't get that? You compare yourself to other people's situations and it creates expectations. And when your expectations don't get met, it typically ends with this selfish and this bitter anger. Like life didn't turn out for you the way you think it should have turned out. You feel like you were owed something, that God owes you some sort of explanation, or he owes you some kind of blessing. And why would he bless them and not bless you? And when you begin to compare yourself, you just start to have this angry disappointment. But I think Cain was really angry, not so much at Abel, but at himself. Like Abel didn't do anything to Cain. I remember the very first neighborhood we moved into. We moved in next to this guy who took immaculate care of his lawn. Like no weeds or dandelions, no dry spots, checkered pattern, the whole thing. At first I thought it was nice, but then my wife really started to like it. Like we'd drive by and say, hey, look at his grass. And to me, what she was saying is, look at our grass. Like it, and so she would look at it, she'd be impressed, and like that's when I knew, I hadn't met the guy, I didn't know him at that point, but I knew I didn't like him. Like I didn't like him because who has that kind of time? And what kind of dark arts are you involved in to make your grass look like a checkerboard? Like there was just a lot that, but really, my frustration was not with him. My frustration was with me. But I didn't want to admit that. It's just easier to be mad or annoyed with him than to be annoyed with myself. If I'm annoyed with myself, then I got to start doing things different. Like his grass was an indictment on me. And I didn't want to admit that because then I wasn't going to be able to do it the way I wanted to do it. So it was easier just to be annoyed or to be frustrated with him. I think you got some of that here. And some of you are living with a person that way. Like they seem angry at you, but they're angry with themselves. Like they've disappointed themselves. They're not who they want to be. They're not where they want to be. They know they need to be doing some things different, but it's just easier to be mad at you than to tell themselves the truth about what needs to change in their lives. So we've talked about this before, but anger is often a secondary emotion. So if you think about that flashing light on the side view mirror, think of anger as flashing at you, letting you know that there's something in your blind spot that needs attention. Like that anger is pointing you to something. Like maybe it's fear that's in your blind spot. We're going to talk about in this series. I can tell you that I would much rather, especially as a man, but this isn't just a man thing, like I think it's a human thing. I would much rather say, I am angry than I'm scared. Much easier for me to be angry than to say I'm scared. So one of the things that God taught me as a husband and father is that a lot of times when anger starts to flash, it's really because I'm scared about something I don't have control over. Like here's an area I care a lot about and I feel like I am not getting the job done, or I don't know what to do, or I'm not sure how to respond. And instead of saying that, just get angry. Because here's the thing, saying I'm scared, man, that's vulnerable. Saying I'm angry, acting angry, that feels powerful. It's not, but it feels that way. So sometimes anger flashes and it's pointing to some fear that you need to recognize. Sometimes it's pointing to regret or shame. And like I said, I think that's true for Cain in this story. It's just easier when you're angry to blame people around you instead of taking responsibility. Verse 7, God tells Cain, look, if you just do what is right, you'll be accepted. Just do what is right. Like you're angry, but really you're convicted, and that conviction should lead you to make some changes in your life. And instead of making those changes, you're just being mad at people. And then sometimes the flashing light is pointing us towards things like fatigue. I think that's where a lot of people are in our culture. They're just really tired. They have felt overwhelmed for a long time. And at some point that turned into anger. And they just kind of wake up angry and they go to bed angry and they lash out. And they're not sure where it came from, but they're just worn out. So when that light starts to flash, when anger starts to flash, it should get your attention, make you stop and think, okay, what's back here that I'm not seeing? What's in my blind spot? In the New Testament book of James, James talks about why are you angry? James chapter 4. So I want to take just a minute here and I want to overlay James chapter 4 with Genesis chapter 4. Because what James describes is what happens in Genesis chapter 4. So James 4 says, what's causing your anger? What's causing quarrels and fights among you? It says, don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? Verse 2 says, you want what you don't have, and so you scheme and kill to get it. You're jealous of what others have. So you see a lot of Cain and Abel parallel here, but you don't get it. So you fight and you wage war to take it away from them. You do not have because you don't ask God. If you're not going to get it, then they're not going to get it either. And he says, verse 3, when you ask, you don't receive because you ask with the wrong motives that you may spend what you get on your pleasure. So he describes a situation that's pretty specifically lived out here with Cain and Abel. And he says, at the very beginning, he says, what causes you to be angry? What causes fights and quarrels among you? And maybe what a lot of you would say, well, it's not so much a what. It's a who, right? It's not so much a what, it's a person. It's this person in my life that's causing me to be angry. And if this person would do things differently, then I wouldn't feel so angry, right? If he would start listening to me, if she would stop antagonizing me, if my child wouldn't be so childish, if my teenager wouldn't be so teenagey, if my boss wouldn't be so demanding, if my coworker wouldn't be so irritating, if my wife would be more supportive, if my husband would be more engaged, if he wouldn't be dismissive, if she would stop being critical, like, it's not so much a what. For most of us, it's a who, and we just think if this person would do things differently, that I wouldn't be angry. It's not my fault I feel this way, it's their fault. They need to do something different. And if they would just see things the way I see them, if they would just understand my political perspective and get on board with me, I wouldn't be angry anymore. It's not my problem, it's their problem. They're the ones who are making me this way. And so we think that it's a person in our blind spot. James says, what is it that causes it? And our first instinct is to say, it's not what, it's who. But then he says, don't those things come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, He says, you want something and you don't get it. Really, the source of your anger comes down to the fact that you're not getting what you want. That's where most of our anger comes from. I'm not getting what I want. That was true for Cain. Like Cain wanted to be able to keep giving God his leftovers. Cain wanted what he gave to be acceptable for God. Cain didn't want his brother to get the blessing that he wasn't getting. Like it came down to Cain not getting what he wanted. And really, like this is where most of our anger comes from. We don't want to admit it. It takes a lot of humility to say it or to see it. I mean, it just hides back there in our blind spot, but it's usually the fact that we want something and we're not getting it. Like I want respect and I want to be noticed and I want to be appreciated. I want to be accepted. I want to be desired. I want my way for once. I want my expectations to be met. I want to get what I deserve. And so we want something, James says, and we don't get it. And when that happens, we begin to blame and justify, and there's fights and there's quarrels. And in Genesis 4, God tries to slow Cain down, tries to help him stop and to think about, hey, why do you feel this way? And James does that too. In chapter 1, he says to the people that you must be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. When you feel this way, this is what you need to remember. Here's the equation for you to hang on to. You have to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And so you slow down, you identify the anger, you say, why do I feel this way? And then you ask the question, what do I want that I'm not getting? If you can identify that, if you can check your blind spot and see that, then you're in a position to humble yourself and to surrender that over to God. And James says in verse 20, he says, human anger doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger isn't gonna bring about the life that God wants you to live. So you have to stop and slow down and ask yourself, why am I angry? And what is it that I want that I'm not getting? And then verse 8 tells us in Genesis 4, Cain said to his brother, let's go out in the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And so there's this blind spot in his life, and it just runs him and his family off the road. Now, God tried to warn him, but he didn't slow down. He didn't check his blind spot, and it just runs him off the road. And some of you hear it, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's not how you should respond. I would never do that. Like, I would never take my brother out in the field and kill him. But I want you to think about maybe how you act in anger. Like maybe it's not this violent outburst. Maybe it is. Like maybe it's yelling and screaming and calling names and throwing things, and you've just said for a long time, that's just the way I am. It's just the way I'm wired. But maybe it's you being manipulative. Maybe that's what anger looks like for you. You're not yelling and cussing and throwing things, but you manipulate. And you turn yourself into a victim as much as possible. How could this person do this to me? You start to play the victim. Or maybe instead of yelling and throwing things and this violent outburst, you get sarcastic. That way you can say what you want to say, and then if somebody gets their feelings hurt, you can just say, I was just joking around. Why do you have to be so sensitive? Or maybe you get passive aggressive and you start to withhold attention and affection and encouragement. And when somebody says, hey, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. But everything's not fine. Or maybe you stonewall when you get angry, like you withdraw and you go silent. And you feel okay about yourself because you're not losing your temper, you're not throwing things, you're not screaming. But one of the harshest expressions of anger in a close relationship is the silent treatment. Like you may not have a violent explosion, but you're like this silent assassin. You don't make much noise when you're angry, but there are all kinds of bodies in the wake behind you. And James says that kind of anger doesn't bring the righteousness that God wants you to have in your life. Don't just pretend to not feel how you feel. Stop and identify how you feel. Ask yourself why you feel in that way. And God warns Cain about this blind spot. He says, but if you refuse to do what is right, watch out. Look, you better look over your shoulder, because sin is crouching at the door. It is eager to control you, but you must subdue it. You must become its master. God puts his hand, Cain's getting ready to open up a door that he can't get back out of. And God puts his hand on the door and says, just stop. Just stop for a minute. Let me tell you what's on the other side of the door. And he warns him about what's gonna happen if he doesn't get this in check quickly. And the way anger goes, typically goes like this. I feel angry, I get angry, I am angry. I feel angry, I get angry, I am angry. To translate that into emojis, something like this. I feel it. When you feel it, it's an invitation to stop, to be quick to listen and slow to speak, to look over your shoulder, to check your blind spot, to humble yourself. A friend of mine named Bob Merritt was for years a pastor of Eaglebrook Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I get out there maybe once a year to preach at that church. And it's a great church there. He's been an encouragement to me along the way. He's transitioned out of that role. But he writes about what he called a leadership meltdown for him. He was overwhelmed and overworked, and the cracks started showing up in harsh comments and bursts of anger towards his family and his staff. And he felt depleted emotionally. He was afraid of where things were going, but he just didn't have the time or the energy to deal with the blind spots. And so finally, his leadership team forced Bob to look under the surface by taking a year-long sabbatical with a leadership coach named Fred. And I want you to listen to this. Bob writes about what that experience was like. Bob writes, Fred and his assistant interviewed all my family members, most of my staff, and all of my closest friends with a series of 60 questions that essentially asked, what's good about Bob? What's bad about Bob? What's it like to be in the car that he's driving? And the candid responses were recorded in a 200-page document that Fred and his assistant, he says, read back to me word for word during a 2-day intervention. For 2 solid days, I sat and I listened while Fred read statements like, Bob overlooks relationships and lacks interpersonal skills in working with people. Bob doesn't listen well. Bob doesn't manage his staff. There's no love. He's unapproachable. Bob speaks before he thinks. Bob has a love problem. I know that Bob cares, but he's not gifted at showing it. And he said, what really nailed me was when I heard these words from my son, David. My dad is angry a lot. And when Fred read those words, he says, Bob says he looked up from the page at me and he just let them sink into my soul and I had to look away. He goes on to write that when you hear some of the same things repeated over and over again from a variety of people who've experienced what it's like to be on the other side of you, to be in the car with you, it gets your attention. He says it broke me and it was the beginning of my new life. Bob says when he realized these things, he said to Fred, I'm afraid I'm not gonna be able to change. And Fred said that he's seen hundreds of people like Bob, and the success rate is about 40%. He said the other 60% continue to stumble and often end up losing their jobs and their families. But Fred said the difference comes down to one word: humility. Those who turn the corner and take their leadership and lives to a new level are those who are humble enough to receive feedback, be quick to listen, and to take it seriously. So Bob says if you're worn out or confused, if you're afraid and somewhat paranoid about what others are saying or thinking about you, if you're angry, bitter, feeling alone and misunderstood, I urge you to ask this vital question: am I humble enough to address the cracks? Am I humble enough to identify what's in the blind spot? And so for some of you, God is warning you the way that he warned Cain, and he's doing it right now. That's what this is. He's asking you, hey, why are you so angry? You need to stop. You need to really think about this. And he's putting his hand on the door, and he's saying, just look, Let me warn you about what's on the other side of that door. You keep going down this path. You keep letting anger control you, and you're saying things that you can't unsay, and you're doing things that you can't undo. And so you need to check your blind spot. Before you get married, you need to check your blind spot. You need to understand the anger you're feeling towards your mom or your dad, and you need to make sure that you don't transfer that to your spouse. You need to check your blind spot before your kids are raised and out of the house and they've decided, hey, you're not a safe person. Like right now, they don't have a choice, but they're gonna have a choice. And God puts his hand on the door and he says, look, I know in your anger, you don't wanna hear this, but you need to hear it. And I know the challenge of a message like this is the people who really need this, and I've been where you're at, the people who really need this are annoyed and angry that I'm even talking about it. They're like, how much longer is this gonna go? Like you're just angry about everything. Let this be God's grace to you. Let it be God's warning to you. You don't have to take the way of Cain. Like your story can be different. What's interesting to me about reading Bob's story is he wrote that, 15 plus years ago. But I didn't know him then. And when I read it, what struck me is how it just doesn't match up with the person I know, because there's maybe 3 or 4 people like this that have no practical reason to be nice and encouraging and kind and thoughtful to me. Like not part of this church, not part of a denomination or some conference that I'm a part. Like it's just been encouraging to me. The last time I was at that church, he's no longer the senior pastor there, but he pulled me off to the side of the room, to the side in a room, and he just spoke life into me. Just said, hey, here's some things I see in you. He prayed over me. And so I recognize that it's possible that some of you who struggle with this the most might have the most powerful testimony. You might be one of the best encouragers and joy bringers if you'll humble yourself and you'll let Jesus redeem this in your life. And so let's just take a few minutes, check our blind spot, ask, how do I need to humble myself? What is it that I want that I'm not getting? And let's surrender that to Jesus. Let me pray for us. God, I thank you for your grace here. I want to pray that you would give that to some people right now who feel really defensive. And even as I've talked through those things, they're thinking to themselves, yeah, but Kyle, you don't understand who I'm living with. You don't understand who's in my blind spot. You don't know what it's like. I just pray, God, that you would give them grace, that Jesus, we would be able to learn from you how to do this, because you're so gracious. When you're being falsely accused, we read that you stood before your accusers silent. You didn't feel like you had to defend yourself. You had all of power in heaven and earth in the palm of your hands as they're nailed to the cross. And the words you speak, our Father, forgive them. Speak grace. So I pray you would fill us with that and you would teach us how to live this way. But I know it begins with just humbling ourselves and being able to acknowledge some things that we want but we're not getting, and then releasing that to you. And then as James says, God going to you and letting you meet our deepest needs and turning to you instead of looking to other people with certain expectations. And so God, would you free us from this? Would you let some of the most angry and irritable and frustrated people who are listening to this become some of the most encouraging life givers because of the difference that you make? It's in Jesus' name we pray, amen. We want to take just a couple of minutes to have a time of reflection on this. If you want to talk to someone about your relationship with Jesus, maybe this past weekend you felt like God was calling you to be baptized and you know you needed to be obedient in that, but you didn't do it, you put it off. And we would love for you to make that decision this week. We'd love to talk to you about that. You can go to our next step room over here on the first floor. Or if you're ready to become a part of our church family, we'd really love to be able to walk with you on this journey. It's just really difficult to do by yourself. We're meant to do it together. And so if you go to that next step room, we'd love to just talk to you about becoming part of our church family. We'd love to have you. Let's stand and let's worship our great God.
articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one cry. Then from north to south and east to west, we do Christ be magnified. Worth the whole earth echoing his eminence.
right, Southeast Online. Thank you so much for joining us. Glad that you're here. Love the new sermon series that we're in, Blind Spots.
Yeah, it was really
We're
good.
talking about it. So this weekend was all about anger. Want to let you know right away, text Connect if you want to respond to the message to 733-733. We're going to follow up with you. But Stacy, you and I were just sitting at the table over there talking about the message. Tell me, or tell them what you told me just a second ago.
Well, I think the part that I'm going to take away for me personally is because, y'all, I'm a hot-tempered person. Chris, if you're in the chat, no comment is necessary. But, you know, it's one of those things when Kyle told us that if you are feeling angry, because that is one of the most contagious emotions that we have, like when mom is angry, the house is angry generally, is to stop and check your blind spot and ask, why are you feeling this way? And for me personally, a lot of times is not a righteous anger. It's something that I am taking personally that I feel like I'm justifying in my mind that it's okay to feel this way, but actually it's not.
Yeah, that's so true. It's our emotions are contagious, and if we're mindful of them, if we're thinking about the message behind them, it's amazing how that can. And the reverse is true, right? When mom's happy, everyone's happy. When we can have an impact, and that's not just true of moms. It's true of all of us. As we have an impact by the way that we kind of control those and really stepping into that. So, love to hear what you thought about the message. Put it in the chat, and love to journey with you. We're going to be joined right now by Derek and Adam in Arkansas. And I love this story, and Derek's going to take it from here about how we've been able to be a part of what's happening in a church plant in Arkansas. So check this out. Here's Derek.
Hey, online leaders, Adam Berry here. I'm the lead pastor of Hope City Church here in Northwest Arkansas. You all and your groups and your generosity have done so much to support us as a church, and now it's our turn to invite you to come join us August 4th through the 7th to come here to Arkansas to be part of what we're doing here in this community. It's going to be an opportunity for you all not just to impact this community, but man, what we want to give you is some
All right, sorry about that, guys. A little technical difficulty. We flew the wrong one there. We're going to go right now, and we're going to go ahead and bring in Alice right now, one of our group leaders. Alice, all the way from London.
Yay.
How are you doing?
I'm amazing, darling. You all right?
Yeah, I wish I could use the darling. You know, Alice, you've been a part of Southeast Online, I think, since our inception, since we really got going with Southeast Online. You've been a part of our group, part of the online experience. I want people to tell us a little bit, tell the people at home a little bit about what it's been like being a part of an online group, and especially your journey from another country, being a part of Church in America. Just talk a little bit about your online group experience.
When I first joined an online group, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't think much could happen. I just thought, go chat to some people and that's it. But it quickly became a family, like very, very quickly. I was in a group with Sarah Rodriguez, who's one of the worship leaders, and it was just incredible, and it made me want to join another group. So I then joined another group with Tommy and Semak, and it was just incredible. And like, I come here from England, I just sat with Tony and his family in the service. I'm about to sit with other members of the family at the 11 service, and it's the most best community that I've ever been part of. Like, I've been in churches in England, and I've never found a community like SE Online. Like, I have people to talk to every week. I have people that messages me if I'm upset. I have people who are there who have never been there. I've never had this before. And my life wouldn't be the same without SE Online. Like, I've gone to Kenya because of SE Online. I've done so much because it built my faith, it built my confidence, and it has just changed me so much.
What's crazy to me just watching is you have been to Southeast a couple times in person, and it's as if you've been here the whole time. Like the gap between online and in person, there isn't a gap really, and that's the thing we've noticed with it. And one of the things I loved when I met you, you know, the quarantine and the lockdown of what you experienced outside London is a lot different than what we experienced here. Talk a little bit how Southeast stepped in during that time and what it was like to have people in your life during that crazy season that is COVID.
Yeah, so during COVID in England, we had like 4 big lockdowns. So I was one of the fortunate ones. I could go to work and I could travel, but I couldn't see friends, I couldn't see family, but still being able to have that family and that connection on Facebook. I wasn't isolated like I should have been, and like how a lot of other people were during COVID. I didn't feel isolated. It actually felt a bit more normal to me because I still had people there. And it kind of, like when my grandma died, that was during COVID, and Southeast stepped up. Like, I was across the pond, and Southeast were the people that stepped up and that supported me throughout my grandma's death more than anyone else back home.
Yeah, Yeah, and so Alice is actually in my online group too,
Yeah.
and we've become really good friends through it as well. But what I love for you is God laid on your heart to start a new group, and you went to Derek. So tell us about the new group that you are actually starting for SC Online.
So I'm starting a new group it's a co-ed group for people in their 20s and 30s, and I actually wanted to do it at the beginning of COVID, but there wasn't enough people that had joined SC Online, and then I felt God saying to me, it's now time. And then when I spoke to you, you said, people have actually been asking for this group, and I went, well, people need it, someone needs to facilitate it, so I'm going to do that. So the group is at Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, midnight my time.
I love that.
That's true dedication right there.
Yeah, I do love that.
And then you have people from your new group that are coming to meet you here.
They
right?
are, yes. They said they're going
Which
to
I
come,
love.
so I'm looking forward. If they do come, I'm really looking forward to meeting them before we start. So my group is actually starting next Sunday, not this Sunday, because I fly back to England today.
Yeah.
So my new group is starting next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern.
I love it.
awesome.
Alice,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And
You're fun.
if you're looking for a group, guys, this is your chance. You're looking for an invitation. Got a good 6-8 week run here before the end the end of the spring and kind of the beginning of the summer. Love for you to sign up. Text SE Online Groups to 733-733. We'll send you a link. It'll take you directly to our online group. So text SE Online Groups to 733-733. Now we officially have Derek queued up in Arkansas with Adam. Sorry about that earlier. Check this out. Here's Derek.
Hey, I am here in Northwest Arkansas with the church planter, Adam Berry. And you all may remember this past December, we were challenged to empty the jar and to give in a completely new way. And one of the impacts of your all's online giving was to this church, Hope City Church. And so, Adam, being the senior pastor, how has that generosity enabled you to do ministry in this season?
Yeah, man. So first of all, Southeast Online, thank you so much. We're standing here in a space that you guys got to see back in December if you were part of when we kind of zoomed in with you all. And we said, man, we would love to partner with you to fill this space with equipment for church, the load in. We're 12 weeks in now as a church. And since that point, man, we've grown by over 300% in people coming. So launching the church helped, but we'll transform this space this weekend with this equipment that you all help provide the majority of into a space where people are getting to know and to experience Jesus. We've had our first baptism. We had an amazing first Easter last weekend. I mean, it's just unbelievable, Derek. And your all's generosity has helped make that possible.
That's awesome.
All right, it is great to see that. And that is the power of being engaged. And we just want to thank you all for giving during the Empty the Jar campaign. We'll be checking in more with Hope City. But if you've not been giving and want more information about how to give, text the word GIVE to 733-733. It's one of the tangible ways we get to be in this together. And we're making an impact, all over the world. We see a church plant we're a part of in Arkansas, to Alice being a part of Southeast Online in London. But then I also want to send you out with a friend of mine that is a group leader of ours in Tallahassee, Florida, Mark. He's got a tremendous story about how he's using his SC Online group and how he's using Southeast Online to make a difference locally in his community with an often overlooked group of people. So a couple of weeks ago, I was able to catch up with Mark and get his story, and I'm super excited to share this with you. So as we sign off from Southeast Online, I want you to take in this story and say thank you for being a part of Southeast Online, and watch this story and think about joining an online group, because you can see how joining a group made an impact in Mark's life and how he's able to use that. So check out this story. Here's Mark.
My name's Mark Rampy. I live in Tallahassee, Florida, married to my wife, Marshall, for just over 40 years. We've got 2 adopted sons, Joseph and Matthew. They're 30 and 34. Joseph lives with us all the time. He's got a disability, and he's a wonderful, wonderful sunshine of our life. I'm a district manager for O'Reilly Auto Parts. It's a full-time job. The online experience is amazing. And what I've said all along, this is an opportunity for me to connect with people that share a common interest, our love for Jesus. I signed up with Southeast Online groups last fall, and it didn't take very long to realize that being in a group was a connection there, and I felt the love and really quick created a relationship with these people. I've been able to take that and use a lot of this material for a group that I do on Saturday mornings at Good Samaritan Network. We're at the Good Samaritan Network thrift stop today, Good Samaritan is a program that's kind of a bridge to tip people out of prison, kind of into normal life. And it's kind of a place where they stay. They've got a place to stay, and all the guys that are in the program generally work here in the program. I come here every Saturday morning and been doing this for 4 or 5 years and do a little Bible study. So this is where we set up. I got a TV here, and we can transmit and show whatever kind of content we can. This morning we watched Ben Stewart's Struggle Well lesson that was transmitted last week. If you don't want to be tempted, don't step here, you know. So it's good stuff that I'm able to take and use and then share. Generally goes 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll have a small discussion afterwards. The majority of them come from prison. They come out of jail, and this is a transition situation. Not all of them come. There's sometimes people just have the homeless needs, and this is a place where they can stay and they have a bed. David, you all right?
Yes, sir, I'm good.
You doing good?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
So you enjoy that message today?
I love that message. Like I said, it's Ben, what's his last name?
Ben Stewart.
Ben Stewart. I like his style. I appreciate that.
Thanks for what you do.
No problem. Thanks for what you do. I appreciate it.
Love you. Rich just told me that you went to the doctor this week. I asked him, I said, why didn't that make the prayer list? You think just one prayer is all you need?
I need a lot of prayers.
Okay.
But you know, it's just one of those things. The Lord,
you know I love you.
Have to put your faith in Him and go with that.
Is it okay if I pray for you right now real quick? One of the things that I've experienced over the last several months was Kyle's One at a Time series, which was a confirmation of what I've been doing along for several years, is meeting these guys at Good Samaritan one at a time and seeing their stories and getting to know their individual stories. I kind of doubted and didn't have the courage that I could do this, and that's one of the things that through our online group and with God's help, I've had the courage to step out and do this and lead people and share what God has done in my life with other people. If you're at home thinking about being in a group, being a leader in a group, just remember that this is God speaking through you. This is God helping you. And with His help and His courage, you can say and do anything